The following is a presentation from the 9th Annual Humanities Days at Montgomery College. The Human in Humanities, Understanding Ourselves and Others. This year we offered 30 remote events via Zoom. To learn more about Humanities Days at Montgomery College and to access other program recordings, please go to this website.
Welcome to the 9th Annual Humanities Days at Montgomery College. My name is Carol Moore, and I am the host of this afternoon's event, the Indigo Field, Poems from the Salvadoran Diaspora. My co-host is Professor Cinder Cooper Barnes. She is the director of the Montgomery College Global Humanities Institute, which is sponsoring this event. So thank you, Cinder, for your leadership and your support. Today's event is part of the Robert L. Giron Global Humanities Lecture Series, and it is a special honor to welcome our colleague, Professor Giron, who generously established this lecture series upon his retirement a few years ago. So thank you, Robert. It's great to see you here today. All right. And now, before I introduce our speaker, I want to take a moment to offer a content warning. The poetry that we will hear today includes images that depict war and all of the horrors that accompany war. And so I'm going to ask you to please be mindful of your own feelings and be sure to take a break if necessary. All right, so now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. If you read his bio, or if you know him, you may already know some of these interesting facts. He is a proud graduate of Montgomery College, and he's the son of a Jewish American father and a Salvadoran mother, who also happens to be our wonderful and recently retired colleague in the counseling department at the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus, Evelyn Gonzalez Mills, who is in the room with us today.
Hi, Mom.
Hello.
So nice to have you, Evelyn. Henry obtained a master's degree in poetry from New York University. He performs regularly, and his work has appeared in a variety of publications. He currently teaches creative writing in New York City. And as if that were not enough, Henry is a member of a Latinx punk band, and he is a hip hop artist. He's currently working on a decolonial sci-fi rap album. Henry Mills, welcome back to Montgomery College.
Oh my goodness, thanks for that introduction, Carol, and for collaborating with me on making this happen. You took a lot of care, and I really appreciate it, and your team, your graphic designer. Also, Robert Giron, thank you for creating this series and giving me this platform so I can share my life's work, and also so that I can share my poetry with everyone. So thank you. I gave you a cyber handshake in the chat and a direct message, but here it is on stage. Also, friends and strangers, thank you for giving me your attention and your time. I'm wondering where you are in the world. If some of you are sitting in your car or stepping out into the lobby from work or ignoring the meeting you're supposed to be in, I don't know, but I really appreciate you making it at 4:30 at the beginning of the week. So much appreciated. I was born in DC, and like Carol said, my mom is from El Salvador and my dad's Jewish. When I started exploring my roots, I saw the theme of facing extermination in both of the roots of my family trees, and they would tangle up, and I kind of dove in. A lot of today focuses on my mother's side. That's me. That's me and her. This is my starting point right here. Also, I should say that just some background for those who don't know about El Salvador. It's the smallest country in Latin America. It's about the size of Massachusetts. And you have to imagine that every century or so, once or twice every century, an uprising would well from the peasantry and the indigenous, and there would be violent repression from the government, who's trying to maintain the status quo for the oligarchy, these dozen or so families that have been established since Spain conquered the Americas. And most recently was the Civil War, in which 75,000 people died. Again, you have to remember how small this country is and that number, what that significance has in that region. Before that was La Matanza in the 1920s, in which 30,000 indigenous people were slaughtered in 2 weeks. So they were targeted, anyone who spoke the language. So now, when I go to research my history, I'm kind of envious of other countries that still have their indigenous culture intact. I feel like El Salvadoran indigenous people and people like myself have had to invent it in a way so that our heritage now exists in part in our imagination. And I often hear like indigenous people who are even practicing in El Salvador will always say there's one God. They're so Catholicized, they might have all these other rituals, but it's become so ingrained, and it's a point of grief for me that's so. Let's start with tortillas. Y'all ever have, anyone ever, let me check the chat. Anyone ever have like Salvadoran style tortillas? I don't know where you are in the world. If you're in DC area, you had to have, or Silver Spring. They're different than Mexican style. Gabriela says, I make them sometimes with my grandma. Yes. What are some of your favorite spots if you're from the DC area? Yeah, plug some restaurants in the chat. Now, Salvadoran tortillas are different than Mexican tortillas. They're kind of thicker. Yeah, you got to try them. Los Chorros, never heard of that one. El Tamarindo, I know that spot. So this is a poem. El Salvador is one of the only countries that uses black clay to make their comal, which is like a griddle. I think it's actually the only place in the world that uses this kind of clay, and there's something special about it. This poem is called Earthenware. Despite chemo-blunted taste buds, my tia maintains each tortilla on the comal surface puffs with its predecessor's essence. I'm not one to believe a titan's hand sculpted from muck the first people, but marvel at how earthen comales survive metallurgy. The skillets would it otherwise be machine made, molten poured, blasted clean. This is from before the first bomb, from the old languages, before the old languages turned to shrapnel. A well-crafted tortilla right off the comal. Taste it, she says. Something endures. I first knew them by scent, then touch. Our nerves coded long ago among an enemy in the swaying rack. Then the sky became indigo and stained my tongue. Before English, before Spanish, before I opened my mouth to so much rain, a membrane turns to selfhood, and selfhood into a row of teeth, and a row of teeth. Show me again, I said, where sharks sleep, and they opened their mouth. Okulin. Like how underneath my English, Spanish still teems, but deeper still, Nahuatl writhes from inside a casket. It worms through the lid. Obviously, this is a metaphor, as in I had to make it myself. Resin still on my hands, the taste of chocolate nestled in the valley of my gums, my tongue reaching toward a word I don't have. Heritage Day. Before I read this one, I want to know if anyone had a Heritage Day at their school where they had to dress up like their culture. Did anybody? I'm checking the chat to see if anyone had to do this. This was PG County for me. I like sometimes, yes, in Singapore, it was disturbing. I shouldn't laugh, but you got to imagine these little kindergartners and like just, well, it was disturbing for Zat, says my friend Zat, but yeah, it was disturbing for me too. We had to dress up like other cultures at our Jewish school. Oh no. Okay. Oh my gosh. I need to move on with this presentation, but I find it hard to move on from that image. This is Heritage Day, and maybe you'll find it hard to move on from this poem. Sorry, Mom, I'm not throwing you under the bus. I'm not. Like I said, we have to invent this stuff. Mom claimed the tunic and straw hat were traditional garb, an outfit I complained you'll never catch on real salvatrucos. Ashamed, I hid in the cubby corner till the urge to pee became too much. I kinked my like a garden hose, trying to stymie the piss, but couldn't, and down it ran, soaking the sock bunched around my ankle. What did Mom know about traditional attire? She wore bell bottoms, and in the Polaroid in my dad's nightstand, she stands by the blinds in this indigo nightgown, wearing a stupid grin like the one I faked. Like the one I faked the morning I left for school in ethnic clothes. Anastasio Aquino, he'd know. 1833, staking a lance on a hill, he declared the end of the oligarchs and the dawn of the Indio, wearing whatever it was Nanualco Indians wore before a colonel hunted anyone dressed like them and left their heads dripping from spikes. But it's 1992, and I want to believe my pulse thrums to the beat of the goat hide tambor, that I sprout the turquoise feathers of cacaopera, that I am one of the last emplumados, and not that boy stepping out of the shower into his costume. I want to give a plug to a nonprofit my mom started called the Asociación, well, in English, the Association for Educational Development in El Salvador. And they fundraise for school supplies, like laptops, books for children there. Here's the link. And there's the donate button. And there's my mom reading kids at one of their successful programs right there. All right. She told me this story once about, I asked her about her grandfather, and he was a miner. She has this memory of asking for a pencil because she never had one or didn't have one. And he kind of like smirked or laughed because in his experience, girls have no use for pencils. And so to see, to see this woman she's grown up to be working at Montgomery College and fundraising for school supplies for including young girls, I'm just very proud and inspired by her. But this poem is also about, this next poem is also about mining and well, everything that comes with it, rapture. Before climbing down the shaft, my great-grandfather prays, not to the son who rose from the tomb, but to the serpent who swallows men into the dirt. He'd seen too many boys rise from the mine, heavy in their father's arms. It was no cave-in, he said, but the gnash of fangs, at times a head of hair, a leg, an outstretched finger like the tail of a rat poking between jaws. This is a map of rivers contaminated by arsenic. And in the east, you see there, it zooms in, and there's a mine there, Monte Cristo mine. That's where I believe for a time my ancestors were. And this next poem is about, well, it's like a once upon a time story. Let me take you there to the heavy metal valley. Heavy metal is in like mercury, heavy metal, not like it. The heavy metal valley. Every time the motherless boy cried, the family goat ambled over, straddled the hammock to offer her teat. The goat didn't know better and drank from the creek downstream from Monte Cristo mine, where the sump of cyanide and ore leaked into the valley. And just as roots pull from the soil even what's toxic into fruit and flower, so did the boy the milk into his belly. He suckled, and the goat relaxed into the suckling. His name never makes it into the stories my mother tells 90 years later. On the phone at night, she tries to remember, and I wait on the line as if by hearing his name, I could save him from el olvido, oblivion, the place of forgotten things. For to say, this boy, who would have been her uncle, bled out of his rectum till he died, makes him seem like another farm animal. The chicken full of eggs when you open her, the pig who refuses to eat, the boy whose stomach collapses not in a quake nor a cloud of gold, but slow and with a burp that smells of sulfur. In El Salvador, indigo was the main export until a synthetic blue dye was developed in Europe. And now all of a sudden, this entire country's economy is restructured around coffee. So what the government did in the 1800s was like an eminent domain thing. They seized everything up. They took all this property away from the peasantry. And now you have all these landless people without work. The government passed a law saying, if you're out of work, you will be arrested and put to work. So it became essentially feudalism. It reinforced the feudalism of the country. The thing is, the labor was dependent on seasonal crops. So you had all of these, mostly men, wandering from place to place based on the season to find work. They were compelled to by the government. And that did wonders on the family structure. And I blame this kind of colonialism, post-colonialism, in part for the kind of cheating and like starting of different families that has been passed down. I'm not absolving anyone from doing that. I'm just trying to understand how it came to be and what role post-colonialism and colonialism had in that. This is just me sitting on the porch with my dog. My dog sits with me on the porch, his tail matching my quiet. No stars to study, only the field of indigo above my hometown. I stare at it and wait for a vision, and what comes is my own pulse. I can feel it behind the clouds, feet stomping macerated leaves till they darken the blue dye Europe doesn't want anymore. But the indigo keeps churning, as if dead Indios still marched across the hills of Cuscatlan to the iron gates of an hacienda. Anyone here play chess? Any chess players? I challenge you. I challenge you, Greg Wall, for my own ego. Since you don't play well, I'll just crush you easily. Pat Rupert, yes, okay. If you know Scholar's Mate, it's like you beat someone in 3 moves. And this was me playing my cousin, and it was the first time I got goosed with this play. As we were playing, I noticed he was missing fingers, and he's the same age as me. And these fingers were claimed by the war. So this poem's about that. Scholar's Mate. On a concrete patio in Barrio de las Flores, my cousin Chamba and I square off over the green-white chessboard. I haven't seen him since we were 3 and can't help but gawk as he rubs his beard with the stumps of his fingers. When he was small, a Huey strafed the walls of his house. Abuela's options were either pray God would skew the hail or heft her sobrino over her shoulder and dash. This 4'5" lady somehow hoisted Chamba and ran, the gunner tracing her path with an M60, cobblestone shattering between her toes as fragments rived Chamba's fingers at the knuckles. I look at my own hands, guilty of being whole, like I should spare at least my pinky. How charitable. As if Chamba needs mending. Did I mention it's his 4th move? That the lost in thought beard rubbing is all for show? He clutches his queen, says, there's nothing heavier than Metallica, then drops her right in the phalanx of my pawns, trained on the piece with which no one can part. This poem came after an interview with an ex-guerrilla fighter in DC named Francisco Pacheco. Ghost bullet. We're sitting in the conference room of a church. It's January. The sidewalks of DC are glazed with ice, but the pupusas have kept hot in their cartons. The captive soldier thought guerrilleros ate children, Francisco says, mouth full of pork and cheese, the pupusa steaming where he bit in. Pausing to chew, he's no monster, breath stinking of roasted toddler, nor does he morph from masa into the action hero I dreamt as a child. He pats his belly, no longer the man photo in my parents' living room weighing little more than his M16. This is where the bullet got me, left ass cheek. It bounced into my gut, but the exit was here. He motions with the knife of his hand, and remembering the bullet splits the decades to the right of his neck and makes him wince. This is another interview I had with another ex-guerrilla fighter. And actually, for the purposes of time, if you're interested in this one, you can email me. I'm looking at the time now, and there's some more I want to get to. So I'm gonna take you to the mountainside in El Salvador now. Young, I was 12. Mom, was I 12? I don't know. The first time I saw this outdoor museum of the revolution, and it left an impression on me. The dud, as in when a bomb does not detonate when there's a defective product. The dud. I stare into the crater the size of a backyard pool. The rusted shell that thudded and failed to blow now rests on a crude wooden sawhorse in the Museum of the Revolution with a sign that says, it's 500 pounds. If a foreign museum were to have it shipped off, encased in glass in a white room with track lights, it would divorce the bomb from what it means in these hills, where it spared the men carting goat milk ice cream, the boys selling bagged tap water, the woman with the basket calling tortillas in a siren wail that reaches the town square. The swing set swaying as if someone had just jumped off. All right. The rise of Radio Venceremos. Radio Venceremos was a guerrilla radio that started, and they would alert people when the military was coming so they could evacuate before a massacre would happen. They would also play music that was banned. And this is about how they formed. The news building fell in a cloud of itself. To be caught with a political flyer was to be taken to a cell from which only torturers emerged. These and other disappearing acts were why rebels needed a medium where they could speak and have no bullets interrupt them. They hijacked radio stations, left cassettes looping on air till the military began to guard the studios. Then one day, a compañero returned with a Valiant Viking 1950s shortwave from Valhalla, he said with a grin, setting it on the workbench. Oh man, I can't read that. As bombs thundered in the hills, smoke rose from the old circuits the engineer soldered anew. He lowered the amp into the chassis like a germanium heart into the rib cage of an ancient warrior. It was time to raise the antenna. He cued Wagner, strode down the street, barefoot children crowding doorways to peek at the man conducting a hidden orchestra as he tested how far the signal could go before it dimmed. So this guerrilla radio station was hunted by this death squad leader. And a lot of these death squad were graduates of School of the Americas, a military training camp in Fort Benning, Georgia. In college, we'd go around the room introducing ourselves, and I'd be sitting there, and one of the current soldiers who was taking classes would be like, I'm stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I'm, so yes, it's basically a U.S. terrorist training camp, and he would be like one of their favorite graduates. I imagine townsfolk interrogating him. The congregation interrogates Monte Rosa. Why did you feed us before you shot us? Feeding, we thought, would soften your resolve, seeing us eye the sacks of rice piled by your boots, the gratitude on our faces at which you then took aim. Was gracias an appetizer? The way Pinochet's mercenaries gave Victor Jara a guitar before breaking his hands. At the School of the Americas, what class preceded Intro to Decapitation? Did they not teach how to neutralize guerrilla radio? How hard could it be in a country the size of Massachusetts to find their trailer in the woods and blow it up? Your mortars, lobbed blindly over the cerro, exploded live on air, warned us to flee into the hills. Why do you think you got stuck with a clip full of teeth with no one to feed, then feed on? You know, we've begun to sing the songs of Victor Jara under our breath at first, then louder, then louder. Monte Rosa's helicopter. Whenever someone demands I stand for the pledge or asks, where are you from? I think of the summer I first saw Monte helicopter, Viridian Quetzalcoatl, carbonizer of pueblos, vanquished into twisted scrap. Knowing this was the best American counterinsurgency had to offer, the colonel and his steed, blown out the sky by a bunch of peasants, makes his death so much sweeter. A lady carting pig's feet said at liftoff, he had one foot on the booby-trapped transmitter, as if on a slain boar. How many villagers, charred remains, big femurs and small did he leave, smoldering between crabapple trees? How many sacks full of trophy ears? How many hands lopped, conquista style at the wrists? Now he's a name on a placard at the foot of what looks like a torogos folded from sheet metal. And pride, I learned, has two faces. One worn when peering down on mountain folk small as ants, and one on a boy a generation later, picturing the last swing of Monte Rosa's propeller. Vigil. Halfway across the Rio Grande, my mother clung to an inner tube. I hovered without body to swoop down, carry her the way she'd carry me, from the silt of her womb into the light of the delivery room, where I woke from a fever slick with river water. Run, corre. My mother rises from the river, water rolling off her back. I will never see her the way the co-pilot sees her in infrared, a body hot white on screen. The coyote leads her into the dark of branches braided into a tunnel. She vanishes, ceases to be Salvadoreña and becomes Latina. Stepping off a bus in Columbia Heights, sweat mats her back. The familiar exhaust of charbroiled meat, even her nickname, Chinita, follows her in the mouths of strangers who've also run from gunfire, as if on your marks, get set, the shot rings out and go, 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 go. An aproned woman pleads, socorro, dragged by La Migra from her kitchen. Beans boil over black onto the floor. A deportee touches down at the airport where a soldier will cinch a sack full of quicklime over his head. There is a baby somewhere in the hatch of a crowded truck. This is how I was born, twisting and kicking through the dark. C-O-R-E. My mother once said to me, sitting cross-legged on her bed. Run, corre, I repeat, and trace each letter in my workbook. Some of you might have been following the news. El Salvador has been the first country to adopt Bitcoin as like legal tender. In fact, every business has to accept it. But I remember before the US dollar, they had colones. I assume kind of named after our favorite Christopher Columbus. So as the currencies change, it's still capitalism. And let's curb our enthusiasm a bit, as it does not necessarily change the material conditions of people. Colones on the eve of dollarization 2001. Colon gazes from a jar of American coins like a lost senior on a bus to nowhere. I fish him out and add him to the mound whose melt value exceeds its face value. Soon, his cheeks sag into the chrome goop which circulated the veins of El Salvador. Mountains sold for this. Indios were open and filled like piñatas of nickel for this. If I could dip my hand, know the labor, thrash of the corvo, cane juice drip off the chin, flip of the bubbling pupusa, comal fingertips singe, the boy beneath the branches of yellow blushing coffee beans, waking in the fog. If I could find the centavitos I paid my tia Imelda for blonde highlights, I might feel my curls between her fingers or reach deeper still, shoulder deep and grasp a head of hair akin to my own. Drag body after body from the money cauldron, deep dive through that orgy of limbs, mangroved bone, hand flowers twitching in the gargle of molten power disenchanted. The Mount Pleasant riots of 1991. This was, I'll just read it. Cinco de Mayo, historians drink to Mexico's victory. But in Mount Pleasant, the barrio just drinks. And the recently arrived from the burning cities know nothing of the law that states you can't stagger down Columbia Road with an open bottle. This is how the riot started, with the man, his cervecita, and huevos so big he could whoop a cop's ass. The officer said she shot him as he pulled a knife, but I heard it was as he unbuckled his belt. Here's a Rio Bravo toast to the desert dancers, appeasing the air for an ice-cold Corona. And here, compa, dear listeners, an ice-cold Corona. For those who know the taste of sidewalk salt, I give you the cool amber of a Molotov. Tell me your breath doesn't smell like gasoline. Ever been so thirsty you burn a block for a beer? No? Then the same for you. Go ahead, call 911. Next time rookies round up the handcuffed, remind them to lock the doors. Here's to whoever fished out a flare from the paddy wagon and fed it to the gas tank. Cheers. And you know, after those riots, it was the first time they formed a council to address issues affecting the Latinx community in DC. I think, you know, before any form of resistance is discounted, I think it's important to remember that changes come from several different modes working in concert. Whether some of them are just, they come out and they look like this. Stray dog who licked my hand. Looks like I have about 2 more minutes. Is that right, Carol?
That's right, Henry. Thank you
Okay.
for being mindful of the time.
So let me switch it up. Kind of. This is okay, so this was not a Tinder date. This was I met someone, it's like a Muslim lawyer, beautiful woman. We went out to Thai food. I ordered shrimp basil. I don't remember what she got, but we were talking. And she kind of started putting it together that I was atheist. And it was a deal breaker, even though we had attraction. Yeah. That ever happened to you? Like someone like, let me look at the chat. Someone like I don't know, shut you down because of your religion or lack of religion. I'm gonna read the chat later. Just let me know. Why the pies won't date me. I've never met God, but my mother has. For one of his names is hunger, and he has dull teeth. When I tell the woman who sits across my lap, God is as real as what my mother chewed the day she ate fog, deals off. I thought you were Jewish, she said. I thought I had something to work with. Listen, I was once a child of God, eavesdropping on the stomach through a thin wall. He was going on what he always goes on about. More, more, he said. And so I ate more through a cord until the wall stretched taut around me gave. This is my last poem. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to the Q&A. Edimon is the root of a word. It's a piece of a word. Edimon. Myths start like this. The first people, all sludge, lying in the sunlight to dry. But the Lencas version of Prometheus is hard to find. In this land, before the barrels of hydrochloric acid, desaparecidos became ideable, corpses left to turn into flies. Still, there's hopes of finding bones. Aunts and uncles I never met. There, look. The AK firing an array of stars, but the sky becomes sky again, and I forget their names. So I turn to this bowl, wrist deep in masa, and lay a moon on the black comal. Tortillas start like this.
Henry, you've been so gracious to thank us for our attention. How can we thank you for sharing your amazing gift with us today? Your passion, your energy, the way that you so beautifully weave together your poetry with your real life experiences. A tremendous gift to us today. And so we thank you.